Welcome to B2B Marketers on a Mission, a podcast for change makers where we question the conventional, debunk marketing myths, provide actionable tips, think differently, disrupt industries, and take your marketing to a new level. From improving your campaigns to making you a better marketer, these are the inspirational stories that will help us change the way we think and approach B2B marketing one conversation at a time. This podcast is brought to you by I'm Blake Consulting, helping you to stand out in the market and drive revenue to your B2B business. And now your host, Christian Klepp. All right, welcome everyone to this episode of B2B Marketers on a Mission. This is the show where we help you to question the conventional, think differently, disrupt your industry, and take your marketing to new heights. This is your host, Christian Klepp, and today I am joined by someone on a mission to help B2B companies build relationships with industry analysts. So coming to us from Rockaway, New Jersey, USA, Robin Schaffer, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Christian. It's so nice to be here.
Great to have you on the show, Robin, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I was thinking about this just before we hit record, but in the more than 3 years that I've been running this show, I think you're the first person that I'm going to interview about this topic. So, let's keep everybody in suspense a while longer, shall we?
That's great. I'm so glad you have me on because it's an important topic and one that's very misunderstood.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the objective of the exercise here is not just to educate people, but also to get them to take action, I think is very important as well. So without further ado, let's dive right into it, right? You're quite the expert when it comes to helping B2B companies achieve what you call radical results using innovative, pragmatic, and highly effective methods, right? But for this conversation, let's narrow it down to a topic that I think is part of your professional mission, and that's how B2B marketers can benefit by building relationships with industry analysts. Okay, I'm going to kick off this conversation with a two-pronged question, all right?
Okay.
And I'm happy to repeat. First question is, what exactly does building relationships with analysts entail, number one? And number two, why should B2B marketers care about that?
Okay, that's a great question. Relationships in the terms of analyst relations is very interesting. I once met an analyst relations expert that bragged about having 5 analysts at his wedding and having such a great social relationship. And that's not what we mean by having a relationship. With an analyst, a relationship at the core helps them understand you and helps you change their perception of you from just an ordinary vendor, one in the pack, to somebody that they really understand, they really advocate for, say good things and write good things. So you want to have that relationship based on mutual respect, learning, talking, understanding, challenging each other, and that leads to that kind of advocacy. And the reason you want that is because analysts are among the most knowledgeable and influential forces in the market. And when you have a strong relationship with them, you do well in like the ranking reports, like the Magic Quadrant. And they also get to, in other coverage, and they also mention you to buyers. Because what happens is if you build a strong relationship with industry analysts, they remember you and they understand not only what you do, but who you serve. And analysts have these consultative kind of conversations with technology buyers. And when a buyer is talking about a problem and talking about needing to solve it, maybe not even talking about a vendor, but talking about the problem, the analyst is likely to think of you because they recognize the problem that you solve, they recognize the audience that you support, and they will mention you. Have you ever thought of or looked at this particular vendor? And that is a win-win. I mean, that's really, the brass ring that you're really trying to get. And that comes from developing that kind of strong relationship.
Those are some really great points. And thanks for bringing those up. I had 2 follow-up questions for you, Robin.
Okay.
Would you say that you could compare this outreach and nurturing this relationship with industry analysts. Could one liken that to nurturing relationships with journalists and media?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of parallels, but there's a lot of difference. Okay. So one of the things is that relationships with journalists tend to be more transactional. Okay. They tend to be the journalist wants a story. The journalist is about now, is about scooping, is about getting that story out there and for their readership, and is looking at it from a very current, tell me about this right now so I can write about it. And the journalist often has a very, very broad understanding of technology. They cover a beat, they cover they're not real specific, so they don't go deep. So you don't generally with a journalist try to build that kind of ongoing reciprocative relationship, because with an analyst, you want to get information from them also. You want to learn from them, and you don't do that with journalists. So that is really the difference. The similarity is that you're telling your story to someone who you want to then convey your story further, right? And there is a similarity there.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and yeah, absolutely. So the relationship with the journalist is more transactional, and would you say the one with the analyst is hopefully more long term?
Yes.
It's not just a one off like affair,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, and
Definitely.
we might talk about this later, but just as a follow up to that question, is it also important for B2B marketers to craft some kind of, I don't know if you can call it a pitch, but if they're going to do an outreach to analysts, that they have to have some kind of approach in mind?
Absolutely. And that's something I spend a lot of time coaching my clients about, because there's an analyst briefing, and it's always with a deck, and you're always educating the analyst about yourself. And what I do with a new client is I have them give me their sales decks, their investor decks, all the decks, all the ways that they present themselves, so I can get their core story. And then I massage it and collaborate with them to create the way they would tell their story to an analyst. Because what you want to do is wow them. You want them to come away and say, wow, this is a very interesting vendor that I want to know more. I want to have an ongoing relationship with. I want to understand. I want to see a demo. Let me know about this. I have questions. I want to get together again. Right? That's really what a pitch has to do, is create that relationship. And you have to give them all kinds of information. One of the things I do in that pitch that I think is a strong best practice that I really push with all my clients is you start with just a very, very short descriptor, non-marketing descriptor of who you are in the space you're in, just so they understand. Very short. And then you say, let me explain that in the guise of a customer story. And you start off right away telling a story, not a case study. It's a difference. You tell a story. So we went into this client and we met with Christian, and he had these problems and these emotions, and this was the experience, and this was what we tried to come and bring and solve for him. And now he was able to take the solution and he became a hero. And so you tell a story which is extremely engaging. And through the story, you're talking about your solution, but you're doing it through the eyes of a customer, which is very engaging to an analyst. And often we don't even get beyond that story. That story grips them and they want to know more. And you end up telling a lot of what you were going to do in the formal presentation through the story.
Yeah, that's very interesting and very pertinent. And going back to your point, or at least I believe that was your point, make the customer the hero of the story, not your company.
So true.
And I'm glad we brought that up, because that's such a great segue into the next question, which is talking about common pitfalls to avoid.
Yes.
Building relationships. And you probably have more stories about these than you care to count, but just give us some top level ones to avoid.
Yeah, common pitfalls is, I think you've heard a million times, is just talking about your product, talking about your solution, talking about yourself. A common pitfall is starting a deck with here are our founders and here are our offices and here are, here us. Nobody cares about who you are, and you can't prove validity, validate yourself in front of an analyst with facts. So that is a common pitfall, is starting with that information. And I always put it at the back after you convince them what you do and why you do it and that you're important. Now I want to pay attention to who you are, and that those facts. Another thing actually that goes back to the PR, the journalist comparison. Another pitfall is to expect reciprocation. So when you pitch a journalist, you're looking for an article, because there's no purpose in doing it unless they produce some coverage. With an analyst, there is nothing that's going to come out of it right away. It's not you're expecting them to write something. You're building a relationship that will lead to some mentions in reports or in an evaluation report, like a Magic Quadrant or a wave, or buyer mentions and recommendations. But it's not like I brief and then I get something out of it. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, no, fantastic. So, you brought up a couple of these common pitfalls or misconceptions that people should be looking out for. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, I think one of the common misconceptions that I come across all the time with smaller vendors is thinking that working with analysts has got to be expensive, because some of these big firms come along and try to get you to do big contracts. And that's not the way I think you start. You start, there's a lot of things you can do, even if you're just building your MVP, you don't even have a lot of customers yet, you're very early in the process. There are ways to start engaging with the analyst early. It does not have to take a lot of effort. It doesn't have to take money, but I'm often coaching vendors on how to use analyst relations early in the process and not wait until you can afford, to make a big investment.
Yeah, well, those are definitely some really important points. And, back to what you were saying, it's almost, there's so many analogies, but it's almost like planting something in a garden and, you expect it to grow the next day. I mean, it takes time.
It takes time.
It takes time.
I always try to look, because it takes time. It's not something that busy executives want to hear, right?
No.
So I really always say, let's break down. We know where we want to get to eventually. Let's break down into little things that will get us there, that we can measure and show progress. So, for example, we evaluate the analyst response. Right. So the speaker is talking, and based on the way they ask questions, how engaged they were, clear, hey, this is great kind of comments, we score the analyst reaction to each briefing. So we can see, we know if we keep getting high scores, that's going to lead to that coverage. So that's something we can measure right away. And start to coach and train and lead and work towards. So breaking it down, it is long term, but you can break it down into some things you can watch and see the relationship growing.
Absolutely. Because love it or hate it, at some point, you're going to have to prove to somebody higher up that you're making progress.
Absolutely.
All of this is working, and the everyone's favorite question. So like, Robin, what do we spend all this money on? Like, what are the results, right? Well, what results are you going to generate for us, and when, and how fast, how quickly, right?
And it's very hard to show that a lot. You have to show it in these small pieces, because the big result is your phone's ringing because some analyst has mentioned you, and that customer's calling to inquire about that, and that leads to sales opportunities. Coverage, and people see your brand. And different things like that is the big things that you're working towards. So you want to get aligned with them, and you really want to set your analyst relations plan within your business plan, right? You want to look at what you need to do as a business. And my favorite question, or not my favorite, I always ask every client, what are your must-dos for the business? Forget analyst relations. What are your must-dos in the next 12 to 18 months? Okay, got those. And then look at what analyst relations can do to move those needles. Maybe they can't hit all of them, but look at everything we do through that lens, because if we're not moving a significant, important objective of the business, it's not worth doing. So there's a lot of analyst relations activities that are nice to do. I want to do the ones that are really going to make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on the point of a plan, talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about the importance of conducting the right research and
Yes.
having an actual plan when it comes to industry analyst outreach. Because you and I both know that you can't just wing it and just spray and pray. That approach is not going to generate the most desirable results, for lack of a better
Absolutely.
description.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you look at the end game that you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And it starts with, understanding the business objectives in depth. But then there's quite a bit of research that goes on to identify the analysts and the reports and the outlets that matter. So we do a lot of research to see what people are reading, what people are publishing, who's reading it, how much influence those people have, and we take a guess at the top tier analysts based on all this research and analysis that we do. So what we do is we might come up with a list of 100 analysts, and then we're going to, that are relevant, 100, 150 that are relevant to what you do, to your space. But then we're going to do a lot of research to say, we think these 7 are the ones that matter. And we say we think because we can't know until we start engaging with them and start, getting into more in depth and seeing their futures and so forth. So the reason we do that is because a plan should be around giving a lot of love to the most important analysts and a lot of focus. And we kind of bifurcate our plan into 2 things. The tier 1 analysts get proactive outreach as often as we can make it happen. And that's through briefings and inquiries where we are informing them everything about our business. We're asking the questions, we're engaging in dialogue, we're having these, that's what creates a relationship, is that frequent engagement and being, showing up the way you need to show up. And then the other thing is which reports. Now, the obvious ones are the magic quadrants and the waves, and but try to really identify the reports that are relevant to your space that are out there, and then of course the analysts that write those reports, get top billing, and then the plan needs to be that proactive engagement with those top analysts, where we try to make sure we touch them once a month in some way or another. And then you have everybody else. That's why I said bifurcated. You have top tier and then everybody else. Everybody else you do in a one-to-many. And you do things like newsletters and webcasts, web briefings, and staying in touch with them. But you don't do a lot of one-on-ones with them. When they bubble up and they say, I'm really working on a report, I'm really interested in this topic, I really want to talk about it, then you engage with them, but you try not to, because that dilutes your impact on those top tier analysts, because your spokespeople only have so much time and energy to do this right, and you want that done right with the top analysts. So then what we do is, once we identify those things, we train the spokespeople, all that stuff, we set out the plan of who we're going to meet with, each month, and what we're going to do with them. We also do, for those top analysts, engagement plans. What's the relationship? What do they think? And what do they do right now? We have no relationship. They think we stink. They do nothing. They say bad things about us. What do we want to have in a year? And we paint the vision of where we want to be with them in a year. And then in the middle are all the engagements that we want to have with them to make that change happen. Because analyst relations is fundamentally change management or perception management. Change the perception of the analyst to get those good things to happen. And you need to, what do you need to do? Do you need to brief them, do inquiry strategy sessions, work with them on a webinar? What are all the things you need to do to get that time with them to make that change happen?
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm glad you brought up change management. That's such an interesting way to look at it. Change management also probably requires facing resistance or facing pushback, which leads me to my next question about how, and you've probably encountered this many times, how can you get buy-in internally to conduct this type of outreach? Because there's probably people in the organization that A, don't understand what that is.
Yes.
B, because they don't understand, and this is the dangerous part, because they don't understand what it is, they think it's a complete waste of time. So over to you. How do you address that?
Well, the thing that gets everybody's attention is the data that shows that 75% of enterprise technology decisions are made with an analyst, have an analyst involved. 75%. And that may mean reading one of their reports. That may mean consulting with them. It may mean, regular engagement with the analyst to help them make decisions, but they're involved in some way. So guess what? In 75% of your enterprise deals, they're involved, whether you're playing or not. And guess what? The vendors that understand that and develop the relationships and show up and present and get that analyst to understand their story, their sweet spot, their strength. Get that analyst to help them solve problems, because guess what? If an analyst helps solve a problem for you, they become, and you do something that they've suggested, they become your best friend, because how can you not love a company that does what you suggest? It just creates a bond. So there's all of this stuff that goes on. And ultimately, you want those 75% of deals influenced in your favor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So get the buy-in using data and using facts, or selling them that long-term vision of what benefits this could bring to the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I like to bring it down to that, because one time when I was having a problem convincing an executive, I worked with the top most influential analysts in the market. And I said, of your buyer conversations, how often do you talk to a buyer where what we do is relevant, not where you talk about us, but you may talk to about a competitor, you may talk in general about the technology. And he said, I have 4 to 5 calls a day that meet that criteria. So I said, look at all those opportunities that they could be mentioning our name and talking about us and talking positively about us. And if we're not there, we're missing out on all that activity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Robin, you brought this up earlier, but I'd like to go back to it and kind of unpack it, if you will. This conducting outreach with industry analysts and basically composing this or developing this pitch, for lack of a better description. Talk to us about what should be in this pitch.
Yeah.
In order to get it right. Well, maybe not get it right, but to have a more effective outreach with better results.
Yes, yes. So I talked a little bit before about how my preference, I think what works well is to tell a story, a customer story right at the beginning, because that captures attention. And that's great because analysts want to understand the value you deliver. And you can have a million slides about the value you deliver and how you do that, but tell it through a customer story. We delivered this value. And then maybe you need some slides to expand on that, because one story, of course, doesn't capture everything that you do. So analysts want to know very much the value you deliver, how you do that, right? So they do want to know what's under the hood. What is your special capabilities that you have in your solution? They want to understand that. they don't need a deep dive. They don't need to go into the weeds, but they do need to know enough to understand what's different about you, how you're different than the competition. They do not need an overview of the market. And this is a big mistake that most people want to tend to make, right? With customers and investors, you need to explain the dynamics of the market. With analysts, you do not need to do that, and it's insulting when you do. Let me tell you about this market, which you are, by the way, an expert on. I'm going to teach you about it. So you may want to have a short, almost a head nod session, like, oh, as you know, these are some of the dynamics that we see, and I just want to confirm that we're seeing the same thing, but you're not explaining them, right? That's a big thing in the briefing. They want to know your go-to-market. They want to know how you're going to get business, and they want to understand your marketing, your sales team. Maybe if pricing is interesting, they want to understand that. And they want to understand the futures, the roadmap futures, but also as the business. You know, if you're going into different verticals or different regions or building different kinds of partnerships. And then from a product perspective, what's next, what's coming. And that's also a place they recognize an ability to help and give feedback. So I think those are the major things. I always like to throw in, by the way, before you talk about exactly what you do and your capabilities, to talk about, you can look at it in a couple of ways, like maybe your mission, like why you do what you do, and your philosophy about what the world needs that has led you to developing these capabilities. We believe the world needs this, therefore we've developed this. So you're explaining your solution in the context of a belief system.
Yeah, that's a very comprehensive approach. I almost like to compare it to back when I was starting out as a junior product marketer, and we had to do copious amounts of market research. And the lady that was mentoring me at the time said, whenever you are presenting what you have researched and you're presenting this compelling argument to get approval, right? You basically funnel it down to two questions that you need to answer. Why? And so what? Right?
Yes. Yes. That just reminds me, the one thing that I didn't mention when I was kind of unpacking the briefing, so call it a briefing as opposed to a pitch. I mean, it's just subtle language difference, is I always encourage clients to end the deck with 3 to 5 summary points. And that seems obvious, but it's sort of like, don't leave it up to the analyst to come to those conclusions. Feed it to them. Feed to them what you want them to remember about you. And especially, this goes back to the go-to-market, who that target customer is that you're after. And if you can paint a picture of the kind of problems and demographics and factoids, so that when somebody comes in the door, they say, bing, 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 they recognize this is a great client for you, and you want that to happen. So the summary has to give them all that. So I always say, if they remember nothing, make sure you give it all to them in the summary.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that. All right. We are going to move on to the next question, which is it could be slightly controversial depending on who you ask, but artificial intelligence, right? It's kind of unavoidable. Like it's spread across different industries and different facets, and it affects almost every aspect of our work as marketers. So here comes a question. Do you think that AI should be used in industry analyst outreach? And if yes, how?
Okay, that's a great question. I wrote a book, by the way, Analysts on Analyst Relations, where I asked analysts their opinions about all kinds of things, but I have a whole chapter on AI, because I just, not to answer your question, but just from the analyst perspective, they're kind of the ultimate knowledge worker. And I wanted to know, how do you see your job changing with AI? And I got some very, very interesting answers to how they see their job changing and to deliver information in new ways and support AI, the reality that AI is out there in new ways. The question you've asked is more about the outreach to the analysts and how that can be supported with AI. I think the biggest area that I'm exploring with my team is if I had a magic wand, which I do with AI, but I'm not sure exactly how to use it yet. We're experimenting with it. I would be able to look at an analyst and summarize all of the points he's made and his point of view on a space and even on vendors, but really on a space. He believes or she believes these things based on this research and these inquiries we've had and these discussions we've had. And I think AI has a great ability because you're just plowing through research reports and trying to come to conclusions. And I think AI can scan the market to help you understand an analyst, what you're how to position with them and how to be there and impress them and talk to them, understand little things like what you call an apple, they may call an orange, right? So how do you use terminology, in a way that fits them? If they believe something that is contrary to your beliefs, and you can extract that and come to a meeting knowing that, you can articulate a position and hopefully change their mind, about how they see that. But analysts are so prolific and there's so much content out there that I think AI can help in the summary and intelligence that the analyst is offering.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very interesting. I mean, it sounds like it could help you save some time in conducting that research, most of which will probably be done online. It will help to also aggregate the data.
Exactly.
There's one tool, I believe, or there's probably several, where you can drop in a PDF document and it will just extract the insights, right?
Exactly.
What would have taken a member of your team probably several hours can be done in a couple of,
and that's what I see, because part of analyst relations, an elevated part of analyst relations, is not just building that relationship, but learning from analysts, the whole learn side. And there's so much knowledge that could be shared within a vendor, within a company, based on not about you, but based on the space and the analyst research. And providing that, being a source of knowledge for the organization is a very powerful place that analyst relations can hold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Robin, here comes the soapbox question. So get up there.
Okay.
Just narrowing it down to that topic of industry analyst outreach. What is a status quo in that particular area that you passionately disagree with? And why?
Okay. I think the greatest one, there's a lot, but I think the greatest one is when the status quo is that people only look at analyst relations for the marketing and sales impact that it can give, which is significant. And I don't want to downplay that at all. But like I said earlier, there's this whole learning side from analysts. And if you are an organization that can be agile and can listen to the feedback that analysts give you, sometimes they say your baby is ugly. Sometimes they suggest capabilities for your roadmap. Sometimes they suggest new kinds of partnerships or new markets you can go after. They are a source of great wisdom because they sit at the cross currents of customers, other vendors, study the trends, and they really have a very unique perspective. Not all of them, but the good ones, right? And your job is to find the good ones, to find the ones that really know. And I think, I've worked in too many companies. It's sort of almost a litmus test. Can a company take in that kind of feedback, absorb it, and do something with it? So I would say it's like listen, learn, and act with analysts. Listen to them. And some people just don't really listen to what they have to say. Learn from it and act when it makes sense, not doing everything they say, but evaluating things and taking action to improve your business, which is what they're about. And I said before, when an analyst has made a suggestion as you have implemented, guess what? It helps so much with the relationship. So not only have you got improvements in your business, you've now got a really strong advocate in the analyst because you did something they said and they love you for that, right? And they feel so much pride and they feel like closeness to you because you've, let them in and helped your business. So I think just seeing the marketing and sales impact of the Magic Quadrant or something is important, but most of the status quo misses this whole other side of AR.
Right. No, that's interesting. It's got to be some kind of like mutually beneficial relationship, ideally, right?
And that's where I think that the executives that question it are not recognizing that mutuality, not recognizing the potential of that.
Yeah. Partly also probably because they don't understand it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
Here we go. Here's the bonus question.
Oh boy.
Okay. So I saw you put out a video on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago where you were singing up on stage. Was that your own song? Was that something that you composed, or was that somebody else's song?
That was my song.
That was your song.
I was very brave to put it up on LinkedIn, but that was my song.
Fantastic. So I'm glad you gave that answer because here comes the question. All right.
Oh boy.
So if you were given the opportunity to perform on stage at a venue anywhere in the world, and they asked you to sing that song, where would you perform and why?
I would probably perform in my living room because I hate performing.
Oh, Robin,
But
of all the answers you could have given.
yeah, really, I get very nervous performing and I get very uncomfortable. I haven't mastered that ability. I actually started songwriting as a creative outlet. And then once I had written a bunch of songs, I kind of said, well, nobody else is going to sing them. I better learn to perform. So I learned to perform as a consequence of actually writing songs. But where the best me, the me that likes to perform every once in a while,
Yeah.
Carnegie Hall. I would just love to be at Carnegie Hall with that acoustics and put that on my resume.
It gets pretty close to your living room, doesn't it, Carnegie Hall?
Yeah.
Fantastic. No, that's a great answer. I mean, short of stating the obvious, Carnegie Hall is an excellent venue. Right? Okay. Robin, this has been such a great conversation. Thanks again for your time and for sharing your experience and expertise with the listeners. So please, quick intro to yourself and how folks out there can get in touch with you.
Well, definitely come to my website, Schaffer AR, SCHAFFERAR.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. I love to engage with people on LinkedIn. Connect with me as much as you can. And my email is robin@Schaffer AR. And I just love talking about AR, as you can probably sense from this interview. And I love talking with companies, with vendors that are, trying to figure out if and how they can make this work for them, because every situation is different. So I really encourage people to reach out and we can talk.
Absolutely. Robin, once again, thank you so much for your time. Take care, stay safe, and talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, bye for now.